This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast. We have something totally different for you. I happen to be in studio with a terrific friend of mine. You've heard him several times on the podcast. He is a terrific entertainer. He's been working for something like 40 years on stage with some of the biggest names in the business. He was the 2017 Comic Magician of the Year, and he now has his own podcast. It's called How to Talk to Humans. Yes, that's right. I'm talking about Larry Wilson. Now, Larry Wilson also, besides being a terrific comic magician and being a new podcaster, is also the master behind the Wilson Method, where he's teaching the communication skills based on the secrets of Hollywood. And what this podcast he's doing shares those secrets with his audience. So here on my show, we're going to talk about his podcast and how important communication is in entertainment. So ladies and gentlemen, you've heard him many times before. You'll probably hear him many times again. My good friend, Larry Wilson.
Oh, please, everyone, sit down, please.
Larry, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
I didn't tell my audience, but I need to be up front. I am acting as producer of your new podcast, How to Talk to Humans. For those that are interested in checking it out, it's available on Apple, Spotify, basically all the major platforms. And it is really different from this podcast. I'm really entertainment based. There's some information that can be gleaned from the comedy and from the interviews I do. But I'm just trying to entertain people and dig into stand-up comedy as an art form. You, as an entertainer, have taken your communication skills not only to a terrific degree of success in show business, but now through your corporate trainings with the Wilson Method, you're sharing it with the business side of the world. How did that transition, your knowledge of quality communication skills, turn into the Wilson Method?
Well, it's a complicated question, I guess, because I didn't realize what I was doing for many, many years. I was sometimes working on instinct. Sometimes I was learning by trial and error. But what really caused this to come about, this Wilson Method, was I realized after a while I was working with big stars in entertainment, and I saw that many of them had something in common. The way they communicated was different than the way most people do. And I saw that they really managed to get everything they wanted out of life. So I would ask them. I would see someone in a negotiation and pull them aside later and say, what was that? How did you do? Or I would see someone handling an interview or handling a quarrel with someone, and I would just flat out interrogate them and say, I need to know what's going on. How were you able to do this? Or how did you do that? And I think the most astonishing thing was how forthcoming almost everyone was. No one concealed anything. No one hid anything. It was almost like no one had ever asked them about these things before. Now, some of them, Scott, I have to tell you, some of them clearly were not aware what they were doing. They were working on instinct. And I certainly understand that because I did so much of the time. But others were very conscious of what they were doing. And even really talented people were not relying on the talent. They clearly saw that talent is ephemeral. It's like a flickering candle, Maybe there's some people who are so talented that they can just bring it on command. But I knew people and worked with people who had won more than one Academy Award. And they were really relying on technique. And that to me was an eye-opening thing, because I thought, oh, well, technique, anybody can learn technique. Anyone can learn how to serve a tennis ball. Anyone can learn how to grill a steak, all these things. These are just techniques. And when someone who's a master shows you and helps you and takes you by the hand and guides you through it, and then you practice doing it, anyone can get really good at it.
Well, I just think that's so interesting, and it's so true. And now we should let the audience know that in your 40 plus years in show business, you've really, being based out of Los Angeles, have had a chance to work with some of the biggest names. I know that because I listen to your new podcast as the producer, I get to have a front row seat for your new podcast. I'm aware of the stories, but for my audience, you toured regularly with Sammy Davis Jr. You have a terrific connection with Hugh Hefner and the Playboy Club back in the day. You even share how you learn the right attitude from Cary Grant from after his conversation and his advice to you. I'm just name dropping a few. But these so-called secrets of Hollywood communication are really the techniques you're talking about. And I think that that's something that, as you said, you weren't aware of, and maybe most of us aren't aware of how we're communicating. And your podcast, How to Talk to Humans, is kind of taking some of the knowledge from the Wilson Method, which is a paid corporate course, and sharing it for free to help people for business, sales, and even in relationships, make their communication more clear and concise.
Yes.
And you, by interacting with these celebrities, and you were wise enough to ask them these questions, is what helped you develop your skills.
Well, it was just curiosity on my part. I'm always interested in things that get results. And I should point out, you said this is a corporate training. I do corporate events. I did a thing just recently for Mutual of Omaha for their employees. That was a fantastic experience. I worked with a smaller mortgage refinance company recently also with their people who they were obviously very high-level people, very smart, but they saw that they had problems communicating. They had trouble. They could be more effective at what they do with better communication. But truthfully, Scott, I can teach anyone if you speak English well enough to understand what I'm saying. Now, that's a key because I don't really speak.
I don't know if I qualify, but okay.
You barely scrape by. You just get in under the wire. But if you can understand what I'm saying, I found, especially recently, I guess because of the podcast, entrepreneurs, and I think of you and I as entrepreneurs, we don't have gigantic organizations behind us. We frequently have to play all positions on the team.
Yeah, the term solopreneur.
Yes, I hate that.
Oh,
but yes, the word I've heard, it's a portmanteau where two different words have been jammed together.
Yeah, okay.
Like smoke.
We're entrepreneurs.
Smoke and fog becomes smog. Although I have to say I like the word smog, but solopreneur, I hate that word. But
okay.
But you can
Never
use
to
it.
be used again.
No. Just because I hate it doesn't mean you can't use it. And I'm conversant enough in some of those popular words that I can use it. But that's a very real situation that many of us find ourselves in. And I suspect that the majority of my work is going to start to move in that direction towards people who are, for want of a better word, solopreneurs. That
No. What you're saying is it doesn't have to be Mutual of Omaha or some large corporation. There's plenty of mom and pop stores with 5, maybe 10 employees where having the right communication skills, not only between themselves and between management and the staff, but also, and I think more important, the customer service skills that we seem to be losing in recent generations, and how to develop them that enhances not only the individual, but also the business.
Absolutely. Well, there's no question about it. But I'd say even, you said mom and pop stores with 5 employees. When I think solopreneurs, I think of people who are one-man band. And I think the smaller your organization is, the more mission critical your communication skills are. I told you that I learned a lot of this from huge stars of entertainment. I think of them as solopreneurs.
Oh, they are actually. I mean, all entertainers are really self-employed. Everything, their whole product is themselves.
Right.
And I've tried to teach this to young comics, is that you're not just the entertainer. You're the creative writer. You're the performer. You're the manager. You're the financial CFO. You're the marketing and promotion person. You wear all those hats.
Right.
When you become a stand-up comic or any sort of entertainer. You have to find the skills and the tools and the techniques for all those if you're going to succeed.
Thank you. That was the button that I wanted you to put on it. You don't have to do all these things. It's only if you want to be successful.
Right.
And I can't tell you how many people I've met in my career who were really good at the entertaining, but not the other things, and did not have success. And they were puzzled by it. And sometimes I was puzzled. I didn't understand that as well. Then I see people who maybe are not the greatest at whatever their particular entertainment skills, but they're doing all these things you just referred to. And the ones who have good communication skills have been enormously successful.
Well, what I'd like to do on this particular podcast that I think would be interesting to me and hopefully entertaining and interesting for the listening audience is you are let's just accept the fact for this podcast you're a master of communication and that you have this long history in show business. Let's compare a little bit. So can you describe to the audience, as a stage performer, live performance, where the value of strong communication really lies? Now, it may seem obvious, but
No.
maybe you could pinpoint.
No, you bring up a good point. It seems obvious, but let me tell you, in 2017, I was voted Comedy Magician of the Year. I would be the first to tell you that I am not the greatest magician in the world. But I think I was recognized with that very flattering title because of my communication skills. I didn't understand this when I was younger, but after doing this for years and years, I see that I'm able to do certain things on stage that other magicians can't do. And it does not have to do with some tricky sleight of hand. I can do some very good sleight of hand.
Yes, I've seen you.
But that's not the important thing. The important thing is my ability to connect with an audience. And it doesn't matter if you're a magician, if you're a singer, if you're a comic, if you're a juggler, if you're a ventriloquist. It doesn't matter. They all have that in common. Your ability to connect with people.
And I'm going to interject and say connecting, we mean through communication. If you cannot engage with the audience, which has been said many times on this podcast, you are not going to be able to entertain them.
Absolutely. I say in Wilson Method training, I frequently refer to 3 C's that I want you to use as touchstone if you get lost at some point. To remember that I want you to be able to connect, convey, and create. And that is a process. I want you to be able to connect before you've spoken a word so that you can convey your message. Now, maybe your message are stand-up comedy jokes. Maybe your message is a song. Maybe your message is something serious, a presentation.
Or the patter of a magician.
Patter of a magician. Maybe there's no patter. Maybe it's an act of music. That's a message. It's a semiotic, unspoken message, but still, so that you can then create authentic bonds with an audience. Now, I'm talking in terms of audience because we're on this particular podcast of yours. But you can use this in all facets of your life. It can be in business. It can be in marketing. It can be in your personal life, in relationships with your family. Every single thing worth having in this life begins with communication.
Well, and this is what's made so clear with your podcast, How to Talk to Humans. And I think it's great that you're sharing your knowledge of this aspect of life and how important it is. But getting back to show business, so we talked about the stage. Now, what if it's radio?
Well, this almost sounds like you and I had prepared this, although we have not. I'm telling the audience truthfully, I had no idea what you were going to throw at me. But something else, another aphorism I'll present to students. I'll talk about 3Ds because it's easy to remember that idea of 3D, you know. The 3Ds are determine, define, and deploy. I want you to determine your goal in communication so that you can really bring your message. And then I want you to define the means of transmission, because every different type of communication requires different tools. And the third D is to deploy the tools you learn in Wilson Method. But speaking of defining, you bring up radio, that's a really good question, because all of these different techniques are used in different ways depending on what means of transmission. You were talking before about live on stage. Well, there's certain techniques you'd be using. On radio, very different. I would say the first thing that comes to mind, on radio, it's a good idea to have a larger vocabulary. And of course, if you're really following my 3D model, then I want you to determine in advance what your goal is on that radio program. And it means you're going to do some preparation, because on radio, we lose the powerful benefit of all the visuals.
Yeah, and that's what I was alluding to, is that on stage you can use facial expressions and your arms and body movement to accentuate what's being shared verbally. On radio, you have to really be better with your terminology, a better vocabulary, but also clear and concise in the message, because they only have what they're hearing to go by.
Right.
Am I oversimplifying it?
No. Let me just tell you, Scott, everything I teach in Wilson Method is simple. If it wasn't, I wouldn't be able to do it. I mean, I'm always suspect when people come out with these highfalutin, complex, Byzantine programs that are so complicated and hard to understand. I've never, ever seen someone who's a good communicator who could not present an idea clearly and simply. And everything that this program of mine is based on are simple things that anyone can do. They work and they're easy. And what you're saying, I think, is absolutely true. I would also add, of course, that vocal affect becomes higher in necessity for radio because it's taking the place of, like you say, your face.
To simplify it, you're talking about words you emphasize, or getting quieter at some point, or getting louder, or using your voice inflections to replace what might be actions on stage.
Absolutely. And affect is anything that has to do with the color or texture of your voice. If you say something sarcastically, we can hear that. If I say, "Oh, great idea, Scott." Well,
that resonates with a certain tone, yes.
Right. You can hear that so clearly. You don't need to see a visual to go with it. And in some ways, now I don't consider myself a skilled radio broadcaster. I consider myself a tyro. But I'll tell you this. The really skilled people who, are famous, you think of, it's funny. The first one who comes to mind is Edgar Bergen.
Oh, it's so funny you said that. I was going to say he was just a superstar in radio, and share the rest of that story.
Well,
most of the audience may not remember.
No, I'm sure they don't. They're thinking you guys are insane. Edgar Bergen was the very first superstar ventriloquist on radio. Now, of course, a ventriloquist throws their voice without moving their lips. So if they have a puppet or a figure of some kind, they alternate between making the puppet's voice without their lips moving, and then they may speak to the puppet. Now, if you stop and think about this for a moment, why do you need a ventriloquist on radio? We can't see their lips whether they're moving or not.
It's really just two voices.
It's but I'm told, and I have no idea, but I'm told that.
And he did have a ventriloquial figure. I mean, he used it even on the radio show when nobody could see it.
Absolutely. Well, his main figure was Charlie McCarthy,
right?
Who was sort of dressed in top hat and tails, sort of a society swell. Yeah, bon vivant. And he had other characters, Mortimer Snerd, who was more of a hayseed kind of character. And there was a woman character, I can't remember her name. She may have been Mortimer Snerd's girlfriend, I'm not sure. But Bergen really became a superstar of entertainment. And it's because he wasn't the slightest bit concerned that you couldn't see them, that the voices were so clear. And of course, I think the material was fantastic.
Yeah.
But he understood exactly what we're talking about here, about connecting with an audience.
Strictly verbally.
Absolutely. Now, I'm also told a story. I don't know if this is true or not. It's one of those show business things you hear. But as Bergen became huge, he was offered some contract, maybe with MGM, but some major studio was going to use him in one of their films. I don't think, they used to do sometimes, they would have these films that had multiple variety acts in, and they would
right.
They would write some kind of thin storyline like it was at a circus or whatever it is. But on the first day of shooting, there was some concern about, because it's not like today where all the technology is so advanced. You and I are able to do this podcast effortlessly. But, 70, 80, 90 years ago, the equipment was much more demanding. It took up much bigger space. You couldn't move it as easily. You couldn't change things or edit things with the facility they do now. And they were worried that Bergen's voice might not carry as well when he was doing the ventriloquial stuff. And they shot some tests, or maybe it was the first day of filming. And they came back and they said, when the puppet is, Charlie McCarthy, his voice is very faint. And so Bergen tried to really raise the level. And they said, yeah, very, very faint. They couldn't figure it out till somebody realized that.
Were they miking?
Well, they were using a boom. You have the right idea. There was a boom operator who would aim the mic at whoever was speaking. And when the puppet was speaking, of course, the guy was a professional boom operator. He aimed the mic at the puppet. And
that's so funny, and yet
I don't know if it's an apocryphal tale. I don't know if it's true, but
you could see that happening because
absolutely.
The whole point of a ventriloquist act is you're selling the concept that this ventriloquial figure is real and is doing the talking, and so for the boom operator to just go along with that plays perfectly into it. So what I was leading, what you're opening the door to the next question.
Yes.
Because we talked about live stage performance and then how you have to be careful to articulate for radio. How does communication different when it comes to television and what's really popular now, these social media reels? But using Edgar Bergen and finish the story, may I?
Sure, of course.
The story was that he was this literally world famous ventriloquist on radio. Right at the advent of television, he comes out, and of course they want the world's best ventriloquist on some of these early black and white, really early on television shows. And it was immediately obvious he moved his lips. He was not really a ventriloquist. He was just had a ventriloquist figure and would talk in different things. And it was interesting because it was somewhat shocking to the producers and the people in the TV world at the time, but the audience was so enthralled with his celebrity, and he was such a good comedic writer that the fact that he wasn't a good ventriloquist was totally not important.
Right.
And he continued to have success.
Oh my God,
it was
it's huge.
But it's such a great point to how the importance of what he was communicating in his act without really the talent of being a ventriloquist carried him.
Right. Now, just to be fair to the memory of Edgar Bergen, I want to make sure people understand he was a ventriloquist, but his technique was not as sophisticated, maybe his lip control, as some people. You know, there's people like Jay Johnson, like Ron Lucas, like Brad Cummings, Sammy King. These are all ventriloquists I know.
Yeah, and there's been some terrific young talent on America's Got Talent, where their lips don't move and they're singing and everything.
And I mean,
it's incredible.
It's like anything else. When the bar is raised high, then people who are coming along who are newcomers have a higher target to aim at, you know?
So bringing it back to the question, as a communications expert, we've talked about the stage and radio. If you're going to go on TV, and we should tell the audience that both you and I have had pretty extensive experience on stage, on radio, and on TV.
Yes.
And so you and I understand, but let's share with the audience. Now you're going to be doing a TV show, either a comedy magic set or a comedy set, or maybe just as an anchor. But I mean, how is communication maybe different on TV than it would have been on radio or stage?
Well, the most obvious thing, I think, is on stage, you can make eye contact with the audience. On television, frequently there is no audience. But it is mission critical that you do everything possible to make the audience feel like you are looking directly at them.
Well, I think you mentioned in one of your episodes of How to Talk to Humans how the camera, what you called the Cyclops, is this unblinking eye that you really have to play to like it's an audience.
You really have been listening to my stuff. I'm very flattered. Thank you. You're absolutely right. That is what I said. And hearing you say it back reminds me of how brilliant I am. When I hear it, I think, by God, that's all true. The camera eye there are a number of things that are funny about it. You may have heard, for example, that there's some famous actors who like to have a friend or someone they know feel good about who's off camera, standing beside the camera when they're performing to it. Well, that's because trying to perform to that unblinking cyclops eye is unnerving. Now, the more you do something, one of my students, a woman named Joni, who's a yoga instructor, after working on a bunch of stuff with her, she said, oh, yeah. In yoga, we say, the body does well what the body does often. And that's more succinct than I could ever phrase it. Of course, the more you practice this, the better you get.
Yeah, everybody's nervous in front of a TV camera the first time. I was, you were. But with experience, practice, and time, you overcome that. But I think that you bring up a good point that people have cheated the system a little bit by having their friend or somebody just off camera so that when they're talking to the so-called audience, they're talking to their friend. But it's back to kind of the live stage thing. You still have the ability to now be succinct in your verbiage, but you can use your facial expressions and your gestures to exaggerate or
and you have
supply
to.
it.
You absolutely have to use that facial affect.
Is it more important on TV than stage, or is it the same?
I think facial affect is probably equal in both places.
Okay.
But it's different. The way you do it is different. Famous story about Jack Lemmon when, he really became famous on stage on Broadway. And when he started acting on camera, I can't remember which director it was, but he said the first day the director said, that was really good, Jack. Let's do it again. Just do a little bit, make it a little smaller, a little bit less. And they did it again. The director said, it's fantastic. He said, let's do one more. Just do it a little bit less. And he said, he did several takes. Each time the director went a little, and finally said, you know what, Jack? He said, just a little bit less. And they did another take, and the director said, that was perfect. And Lemmon said, I wasn't doing anything, right?
Well, and I'm going to paraphrase and say that when you're on stage, you have to project, you have to emote, you're bringing the audience in by engaging them personally on TV or film, or even on one of these social media reels. You have to, as you said, bring it down and bring it into the little box, into the little screen.
Absolutely.
That's a great story. I hadn't heard that.
The camera can get so close to you, It's so interesting, the difference between being on camera or being on stage. Each of them is able to do certain things that the other one can't do. On camera, the camera can come in so close. We can see your eye. We can see when the beautiful woman walks in the room. We can get close enough to your eye to see your pupil dilate, right? Or, conversely, we can see in Spartacus 10,000 armed soldiers running across the plain, Now, we can't do that on stage. But on stage, we can feel human energy coming off you. And we cannot get as close or as epic grand as we can on film, but we can feel things, and unlike film or television, on stage, everything is one continuous experience with no editing, with no...
Right. Like a movie, take 12,
Right.
It's funny. You brought up something I hadn't thought about that is so true. And I hope the audience finds this as fascinating as I do, because it's been shared in some of the earlier podcasts and interviews that one of the great things, one of the addictive moments in stand-up comedy is when you gel with an audience and you connect with them so much that it's not just the audience, it's not just the entertainer, but the whole room. I mean, even the waitresses are caught up in the energy and the positive feeling of the laughter. And that's when entertainers, you know, I'm sure there's several terms, I can't think of one, but they hit that zone.
Hit
that groove. And it's a shared energy. And yet in movie and TV, because even if you have a small audience, they're way back away from the stage,
right.
And you got the cameras in between. You don't get that warmth, that shared experience. And so you have to kind of create it into that unblinking eye. But that's so fascinating to me.
Yeah, you know, it's weird because that, of course, I have to tell you, quite frankly, I don't really like any of my television. I've done a few hundred television appearances.
Oh, yeah, you did Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas, all those daytime shows.
Oh, my God.
Dinah Shore, you've done some late night stuff. You've done a lot of TV.
Right, but I don't like it because of what you just said. Because I cut my teeth on live performance on stage, and you can feel what's going on with the audience and you. And what you just described, getting into that groove, I mean, this is why no matter what genius technology is invented, when they come up with whatever the latest thing is, where they place this screw that they drive into your head and it transmits the entire story to you, whatever they come up with, it will never replace live entertainment because we feel something when there's live entertainment. And that, of course, is the most exciting part of it. I frequently will tell a young up-and-coming entertainers will come to me. They'll say, oh, would you watch my set and tell me what to do? And I'll say, the most important thing is to remember that what happens on stage is like the morning dew. Once you get off stage, it's gone. It's over.
Evaporates, right?
It evaporates into the mist and it's done. And for some people, that's enormously frustrating. It's like, no, I want to trap that. Well, guess what? The magical part is that you can't trap. Now, sometimes someone will film the first stuff that came to mind was Richard Pryor live on the Sunset Strip. That's an amazing record of him performing live on stage to a live audience. But even still, being in the audience of a live theater experience, whether it's stand-up comedy or whether it's Shakespeare, it doesn't matter. It's such an incredible experience to feel. I'm also, among other things, I'm the executive director of a nonprofit in Northern Nevada, and we're focused on bringing school kids to see live theatrical experience and into libraries to see the resources they have there. And we do an event every year called Spellbinders, where we do all this stuff, and it's all free for the entire community. But when we do a big show in the Performing Arts Center in Reno, the Pioneer Center, seats 1,500 people. And we do 2 performances there, and it's packed. And every single year, this will be our 9th year doing, but
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Every single year, I'm mobbed by parents afterwards who say, my kid is 3 or 4 or 5. I've never seen them sit still through something like this without looking at their phone. And I'll say to them, well, they've never seen any live theater before. And the parents will say, oh yeah, they've seen it, on the computer. I go, no. It's not the same.
Yeah. And that's so true. In fact, at the end of every one of these shows, our close of our podcast is, as much as we try to share comedy entertainment in great stories and conversation through the interviews, we say at the end of every show, hey, we hope you enjoyed the comedy, but go out and see it live. It really, there's no comparison. I have one more question, but before I get to that, in a short, succinct way, they're really popular now are these 30-second, 90-second reels that the young people are doing. And I'm saying that because both Larry and I are
in our early hundreds.
a little on the gray side. Any little bit of advice on communicating properly on these short video reels?
No.
Okay.
Well, you wanted me to be succinct.
Yeah.
I've seen them. I have mixed feelings about them in many ways. I have mixed feelings about them in the same way I have mixed feelings about Twitter, where you're limited to a very
right. You're trying to communicate, but you only got 27 characters or words or something.
right, whatever it is. I understand the appeal of them because the limitation of the medium. I don't know what it is with Twitter. 144 characters, is that what it is?
I don't know what it is. Yeah.
But whatever it is, the appeal is, I don't have to worry about coming up with a bunch of stuff because I'm limited to this short thing. I think those 30-second reels, same idea. I've seen a few of them that I thought were brilliant when I'm thinking of the reels, where someone who was really creative
was able to communicate a concept in 30 or 60 seconds.
Right. And they clearly understood that rather than being a limitation, it was actually a benefit. I only have 30 seconds, so I don't have to worry about, and you can check off all these things that you don't have to think about. It's like being shot out of a cannon.
All right.
And it takes a very special kind of person to craft that and make it something special. Now, I'm sure everyone listening to this has seen a gazillion of them where it's someone who steps on a rake and it hits them in the face. This is fantastic. It's the highest form of comedy, right? Well, part of the egalitarian nature of social media, where some of these reels appear, is that anyone can put up anything they want.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
great. Okay,
Yeah.
so you don't have to watch them. But to see gems, to see something really special, that doesn't occur very frequently. In the same way, you see on Twitter where people will make a series of tweets because 144 characters isn't enough for them to say what they're trying to say, right? Well, it's a very, very tricky thing. I think, of course, back to the bard, Shakespeare, who has Polonius say, remember, brevity is the soul of wit. Well, there's something to be said for that. Of course, it should be pointed out, it's Polonius, I guess, who says this after like a 3-page speech.
Well, that's Shakespeare's humor.
Absolutely. He knew perfectly well. Yes, it's true, brevity is the soul of wit, but he's also poking fun at himself.
Yeah. Well, I think two things have happened. One, we've explained that reels, much like the very beginning of MTV, the next one will be good.
You know what? It's funny you should say that. One of the very first television specials I did, I came up with an idea for Showtime Cable to do some comedy magic stuff. And I don't know how I came up with this, but I said, we should do a thing that's just comedy magicians. And the people they said, are there any besides you? I said, oh, yeah, there are. And so I suggested them. And I was trying to be, I didn't realize at the time I was actually functioning as a producer. I said, well, there's this woman, Judy Carter, very funny, and has a zany kind of outlook that's her own. And then there's this British comedy magician, Martin Lewis, who's very urbane, but very dry and like a British gentleman, but hilarious. And I thought, and then you have me and my stage troupe who are sort of almost like sitcom characters, right? And they said, well, we're going to go out and, look at a bunch of different. So they went out and looked at they looked at hundreds of comedy magicians. And then they decided to use me, Judy Carter, and Martin Lewis. And I think of this because it comes back to this thing again, Scott, that there's so many different ways that you can present this stuff, you know, but we want to see things that we really enjoy. Now, we did this show. You can see I'm tiptoeing around. I'm trying to be diplomatic. We did this show, and it was a huge success for Showtime. So I came back to them and said, now you should give me my own show. And they said, no, I got a fantastic review in the trade papers. The Hollywood Reporter said something about me that made me sound like a god. Very, very generous of them. And I thought, well, this will be great. They said, no, we want to have a lot of different things. So if somebody doesn't like you, they know that soon there'll be something different coming up. And that's really what you were just saying. About MTV in the early days. Now, many of your listeners may not know that MTV used to have music videos.
Oh, that's what I was talking about.
I know that's what you meant, but they don't know because MTV doesn't have music videos.
Oh, that's right. It was 24/7 music videos, and you would watch over and over and over, and there would be all these really badly produced or songs that weren't that good, and then like some hip song and or a good director put it all together, and you had this really genius music video. Yeah, right. We should explain it. And I have one last question, but I wanted to say that going way back to when I started, could you give a short, succinct advice for reels? And you were correct. The answer was no.
No. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's probably its own kind of art form. And there may, there's a funny thing that I see taking place because of technology, and I'm not going to say it's good or bad. It's just new. It's just different. I see some young magicians who can do some extraordinary things, but they can only do them on camera.
Oh, they wouldn't have the talent and the patter for a live show?
No, it's not talent or patter.
Okay.
It's what we call angle problems in magic.
Oh.
Right? Now,
using the camera to assist in the trick.
That's right. But it's not really a camera.
Illusion.
It's not, well, you can call it whatever you like, but it's not a camera trick per se. It's just that they have to control the angle that the viewing audience is looking at them. Now, some people I know in magic are very disdainful of this, and they're saying, oh, that's not... Well, I think that's silly. It's just a different kind of way of performing the magic. In that same way, those 30-second reels, that's a very specific kind of thing. And I'm sure there's somebody out there right now who's doing incredible stuff with it, just incredible stuff.
Okay, well, you're being much nicer than I might be, but
I'm very nice. I don't know if you know that. I'm extremely
All right,
nice.
to my last question. So I asked you on this guest spot on my podcast because you have just started a new podcast, How to Talk to Humans, teaching and really sharing the secrets of Hollywood communication through the 3 C's and the 3 D's, and there's many other things that you are willing to share for free through this podcast. And I wanted to end this segment of my podcast talking about the value of communication and entertainment, that now that you're a podcaster, do you feel that your gift and techniques in communication, you've already, succeeded on stage, you've succeeded on radio, so you've succeeded on TV. How would you relate to the audience, the idea as a podcaster in using what you're sharing, these skills, to impact communication?
Truthfully, this is an extremely exciting endeavor, podcasting, because you have the benefits of being a broadcaster with your own show without the restrictions or restraints of a network or a syndication group or anything like that. Again, it comes back to that egalitarian idea that anyone who wants to be a podcaster can do so. And so I think the people with the strongest communication skills will probably be the dominant force in podcasting. I hope that might be me. I hope that I know that I enjoy doing it so much because it allows me to do the things that are interesting to me without those restrictions of, the network says you have to blah, 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 or the sponsor doesn't want you to mention. There's nothing like that. There's a tremendous amount of freedom.
Yeah, and I think that for me, and this has been shared, I am enjoying reliving what was a high time in my life with stand-up comedy and people and relationships I've built, like with you, sir, and being able to keep that going now that I'm a little bit older. And I think you're right that podcasting offers a certain amount of freedom to express yourself and share what's important to the host of the show, and is able to put it out literally to the world,
right,
to see if there's an audience that agrees with your sentimentality or whatever.
Well, there's something even.
Am I saying it wrong?
No, you're saying it very accurately, but I think there's something that's so obvious you're forgetting, that when you're modestly saying, to see if there's an audience. Of course there's an audience. There's an audience for anything anyone might want to share. But the incredible opportunity here is that it's a self-selecting system, that if you have something to share, for instance, all these people who are guests of yours, stand-up comics, and the archives, you have all this stuff, the people who love that stuff, of which I am one, are going to be regular listeners to your podcast. That the people who don't care for that, well, they'll never have anything to do with it. For my Wilson method, the training, this podcast of mine, How to Talk to Humans, I found the people who have the most interest in it. Those are the people I really want to speak to. The people who want to learn better communication skills. That's so fantastic to be able to identify the people who are your tribe.
Well, that's a good way to put it. Your community,
Yeah.
the people that have a similar interest in what you're sharing.
Absolutely.
And I found it, I was a little awestruck at first. My podcast, which is 3 years old now, and it'll be about 3.5 years old when this launches, but it's being heard in Africa and Australia and in all around the world, and by decent numbers. And it's like, one of the things that I'm proud of is that I think stand-up comedy, I'm always using the term, funny is funny. And even though I'm sharing a lot of material from the 80s and 90s, it's as funny now as it was then. And then the interviews I do, which are now current, we're sharing so many of the stories and information about this great industry you and I have been a part of for over 40 years. And I just am so happy that there is an audience for that, and that,
of course,
that people are in a sense, by listening, agreeing with me that there's value to this art form. And I have to say, as the producer of your podcast, How to Talk to Humans, I think we've plugged it a few times, available on all platforms. You should go check it out, or go to his website, thewilsonmethod.com, and learn even more. And I think you'll soon be able to find the podcast on your website. There'll be a link.
Yes, you can. You know what? I'm going to do something I wasn't planning to do.
Uh-oh. Ladies and gentlemen, pay attention.
Well, now, settle down. You may have oversold this. I was just going to say that on my website, there are a lot of things, though. The podcast episodes you can find there. Of course, you can find them anywhere that podcasts are available. I'm just about to roll out online training in Wilson Method.
Oh.
And what I'm going to do for your people, I'm going to have my IT person create a special page with a bunch of extra free stuff, and we'll do more than free stuff. You think, how could it be more than free? Is Larry going to send us money? No. But here's what Larry will do. If you go to thewilsonmethod.com/Scott, SCOTT.
The secret magic word, Scott.
That's right. If you go to thewilsonmethod.com/Scott, there'll be a lot of stuff there that isn't on the regular main page for Wilson Method. And if someone is interested in taking the online training, I'll have that at a 50% discount.
No.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, I'm saying it just because of what we were just talking about made me think of it. If someone listening to this podcast feels like, yeah, this is something I want to be able to do.
And again, it could be an entertainer, for business, for relationships. What you teach in the Wilson Method is really universal. It could be used just to improve yourself.
You mean for humans?
Oh, for humans. I'm sorry. We do have to be succinct.
Well,
it won't help the undead.
No, it will not. And I take great pains to point this out. It will not help the undead, werewolves, zombies, extraterrestrials. I can't help you with that. But no, you're exactly right. Anybody who wants more from their life, anyone who feels frustrated, anyone who has a small business that they feel like, God, I'm spinning my wheels and I can't get this. The solutions are so simple and they're within your grasp. They're just better communication skills. That's all.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a fun episode, fun show for me to do. I know we weren't really talking about stand-up comedy per se, but I think it is so important to share with, I enjoy hearing it, and I think the audience can learn something, that the value of quality and concise communication is such an important aspect of any form of entertainment, whether you're a singer, stand-up comic, actor, whatever it is. And Larry, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing not only a little bit of advice and history on this, but also that your podcast, How to Talk to Humans, is offering so many valuable lessons and advice for free. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this week's show. We'll be back next Sunday with another great show. Larry, continued success, my friend.
Thank you. And I should also point out, for those of you who are interested in finding a podcast producer, you could do no better than Scott Edwards. I say this with complete and utter sincerity, that Scott's function as a producer has been extraordinary.
Well, thank you very much. And let's just keep in mind that on thewilsonmethod.com, use the secret word, Scott, and get a 50% discount and loads of free information on how to make your communication skills better. Larry, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, come back next week and we'll share even more exciting stand-up comedy and information. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, Your Host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.